Hello and thanks for checking out ChartGuys.com. We're proud to be one of the most successful technical analysis communities online, teaching you the skills to become a more confident, effective, and informed trader. Join our community of hundreds of analysts worldwide working together to learn the charts, generate profit, and achieve financial independence. For access to daily live chart analysis and market coverage, a thriving chat community, along with dozens of hours of exclusive educational materials. We look forward to seeing you. Let's check out some charts. Hey MJ friends, certainly can't cover all the tickers that we did over the weekend in the double videos lasting well over an hour. So we're going to look at the major Canadian names, the Tier 2-3, VFF T-God Labs, and then on the US side, CWeb, Cura, TRUL, IAN, OH, CL, and Tilt. So I want to make some distinctions and some broader overview of what the sector is doing right now. Obviously, we've seen a lot of weakness in the sector as a whole on pretty minimal market weakness. Again, SPY had its second highest close of 2019 today. Meanwhile, some of these stocks are absolutely dumping. So what we're looking at is right now extraction plays are running while everybody else is dumping. Labs, oils, there's a couple of extraction play names that are clearly seeing an uptick in volume and price action. We'll look at labs, which is Blue Sky Breakout. We'll check in on oils as well, just to show you an example. It's a very low cap name. Certainly does not take a lot of capital to move. But that's a strategy to be watching. Separate oil extraction names and watch to see how these names respond in the late summer into the fall. Because in October, we're looking at a news event in Canada with, dealings on edibles and things like that. And extraction plays are going to be a focus then. So we're looking into the future at a known date and a known event and anticipating that the extraction plays are going to see the most hype running up to that October date. So while it's still very early, 7 months in advance here, that's something to be aware of and something to be watching for going forward. Another clear distinction is the major Canadian names are in weekly downtrends and we're watching for monthly higher lows to form, while the US names are in weekly uptrends and we're looking for weekly higher lows to form. That's speaking in generalization to most names. IAN is not in a weekly uptrend. It is looking for a monthly higher low, similar to what the Canadian names are doing. But just speaking in generalizations, the US names right now are still in weekly uptrends, and they're just looking for weekly higher lows after seeing very significant, very overdone moves to the upside in Blue Sky Breakout. So we had APHA earnings today. That's a big reason for a lot of red. APHA was down 15% at one point, and we ended up closing the day down 14.85%. So we're down 15% on APHA. That put a damper on everybody. But just on my screen here, I'm looking at Canadian and US names, and we've got down 6%, down 8%, down 7, 5.5, 6, 3.5, 14, 4.5, 4, 7. It's red out there, and it's bad. And the RSI levels are getting cooled off with hourly oversold little weak bounces that lead to continuation down. So CGC right now, if we're looking for the bulls to try and shift momentum on the daily time frame, just looking at this chart, I can say that until the bulls get over the daily 12 period and 26 period exponential resistance, the bears are going to keep complete control. We've now rejected from this resistance level 4 times in the last 2 weeks, and the bulls lost their bounce mojo with the double top at 42.65. So 42.65 and 42.64 is a double top. Bulls are not going anywhere unless those resistances break. And on the 4-hour time frame, we have our low of the dump, high of the bounce with the TSX 60 news, looking for a 4-hour higher low, but not confident that the bulls have established that higher low, and we'll see if they can do that tomorrow. If we do, we would look for a lower high and a tightening 4-hour range into Wednesday if we do get any kind of bounce tomorrow for the bulls. If not, and we keep fading down, 39, actually it would be 40.33, 40, and then 39.66 as the support levels to be watching. So the bears have short-term momentum on CGC. This hourly bounce, you're going to see it on a lot of individual names. It's a weak bounce, it cools off RSI levels, and it doesn't give the bulls any confidence going forward. And you can compare it, if we just look at the VFF bounce on the hourly time frame, a much more significant bounce. And if we compare it to names like CGC or even Cron here, Cron on the hourly time frame, its bounce, again, just much weaker. So that's looking at individual names and comparing them with today's action. We could say, how significant was the bounce off of the low of the day? Is it just a lower high cooling off RSI levels? And are we going to see further downside tomorrow? So most individual names, the key support is going to be the low of today, first thing tomorrow. And if it breaks, we certainly know that the dump is not done at this point. So CGC short-term resistance is 40.96, the top of the hourly bounce. Cron is in all-out dump mode. And going back all the way to a month ago, we were highlighting where if we lose 1872 support, there is no support established. Since then, we didn't get an all-out flush. We broke it, traded sideways for 2 weeks, and now we're getting the clear follow-through from that support break, down almost 15-20% from that bear break. Daily RSI is now at 31. Look at the history of Cron. The daily RSI in the history of Cron has one time gotten down into the 20s, the low 20s. 24 when we were trading at $1.40. Since then, we have seen the daily RSI bounce off of 31, 2, essentially 3, 4 times, and here we are again. There is a lack of support. We are looking for a monthly higher low, just like CGC is a monthly equilibrium looking for a higher low. Cron is a monthly uptrend looking for a higher low. There's no red flags on this monthly chart. You show me this monthly chart and you tell me that's a daily chart, I'd say bulls are in full control, increasing bull volume on the way up, declining bear volume on the way down. We're just looking for a daily higher low to form. Because of the size of the pullback, I would anticipate that a lower high would form when we do establish that higher low. Unlikely to just see continuation, but I wouldn't see any major red flags at this point. So long-term uptrends are not in jeopardy, but it's on the monthly time frame for Canada and on the weekly time frame for the US. That's a pretty big distinction to make between the two. So we are watching Cron for a daily oversold bounce. We closed with a little bit of strength. I would like to see a gap down open and a flush under 15 to see really extended action and then get in for an oversold bounce. But you can see the weak bounce attempt. It's a potential hourly bear flag. 1594 is the first resistance level. If we change the hourly trend on any names, we zoom out to the daily, and Cron, anything under 1814 is just a lower high. Bottom line is we're not anywhere near changing the daily trend, so we are just looking for short-term bounces to cool off RSI levels at this point. APHA, huge gap down on earnings and the break of weekly support. 874 broke. We closed weak on APHA. There was a really nice bounce opportunity first thing in the morning where we flushed and then a V-shaped bounce for a 6% move. And then from there, we had a 15-minute equilibrium, and we did end the day with a bit of weakness. So looking at that on the hourly time frame, I've got resistance at 890, and the bulls are trying to hold 848. If we break 848 tomorrow, we know the bounce is not starting. The low has not been set. And looking at this weekly chart, this is now from sideways, multiple months trading. We have broken key 874 support, but there is still a key 808 support level to be watching. And again, longer term time frame, monthly chart, we're watching for a tightening range to form. And we're not in a monthly uptrend on APHA due to the shorting fiasco with Hindenburg research and all that went on. It's a monthly downtrend, lower highs and lower lows. So that's a distinct difference between APHA and all the other major names. ACB on the daily chart, clear bear break of the inside bar, weak close at the low of the day. 838 is the only support level nearby, and if that breaks, there's a gap at 825. Anything on the daily chart under 914 is just a lower high being set. And looking at the weekly chart from here, we're still in an uptrend. So anything above 666 is a higher low. We attempted a weekly higher low, but we didn't get enough follow through to set a lower high. So this is still the same period of consolidation on the weekly chart for me, with every candlestick being a lower high 4 weeks in a row, and we're looking for that higher low compared to 666. If we look at it on a monthly time frame, just to compare, we have a higher low on the monthly and an equilibrium shaping up. If we lose the weekly uptrend, we look for a monthly higher low and an equilibrium similar to what we're watching for on CGC. TLRY, also not in a monthly uptrend and very weak. So again, no support. We're in free fall. The daily RSI is under 20. It'll bounce when the sector bounces. That certainly didn't happen today. There's a gap to fill at 44.37 as the next level to be watching. And hourly resistance, we've got a level at 49.59. and 52.59 after that. So when the bounce gets going, in terms of percentage gains, I do expect TLRY to be among the leaders in the MJ space for the bounce, but there's no sign of it happening just yet at this point. The faster you go up, the faster you pull back. The faster you pull back, the faster you go back up again in general when you're looking at bounces and volatility. OGI had earnings report, and we dumped and closed at the low of the day on big bear volume. We're breaking some support levels here, so we zoom out to the weekly chart, and we do have a loss of the weekly last support level established at 864. So we now are in an area with a lack of support, really looking down towards 8 psychological, 812, and then 8 psychological as support levels. We're not near oversold on the daily. The hourly RSI is just getting oversold with the end of the day dump, and we are seeing a clear shift in momentum on the daily time frame to the bears, tagging along and joining everybody else in the sector that's seeing this weakness. So overall, if you're looking at this weekly chart on OGI and you're comparing it to Canadian MJ names, it's still one of the stronger charts. Even though we did lose that weekly support level, everybody that we just looked at, aside from ACB, does not have a weekly uptrend. So OGI, after the significant move that we've seen over the last couple months, no major red flags, and the monthly chart is certainly in an uptrend at this point. TRST, still all bear. This has been one of the weaker MJ names that we've been following for weeks, and pretty much the bulls have not shown us anything ever since the gap down. We've had a couple green days. We have not seen any follow through on any bounce. We keep seeing inside bar bear breaks time and time again, and we dropped to lower lows today. So 902 is support. The weekly uptrend has very clearly been lost. So we zoom out to the monthly chart, and we're looking for a monthly higher low and equilibrium. It looks similar to ACB, although more pullback than ACB at this point. It's an equilibrium similar to CGC, although the preceding action is a bit different on CGC. But the bottom line is monthly tightening patterns. And if these monthly tightening patterns play out all 2019, you're going to see a lot of volatility in the MJ space dry up. Volume and volatility will dry up if these monthly patterns tighten, but when they break, we're going to see a big spike in volatility, and that could potentially be Q4 2019, Q1 2020 for us to be keeping an eye on, but we're going to take it one day at a time as always. Just have the longer term perspectives in mind. Are we in monthly uptrends or are we in monthly equilibriums? That's a big distinction between individual names. Hexo bear action continues, bear break of 815. The bear break occurred at 862 and it's been nothing but follow through at this point. And on the weekly time frame from here, we're still in an uptrend. So Hexo and OGI and ACB are 3 names on the Canadian side that are in weekly uptrends. Again, many more names on the US side are in weekly uptrends, but these are some names that are as well. So anything above 685 keeps the weekly uptrend intact. No bear volume compared to the bull volume on the way up. And we'll see if the bulls can form just another weekly higher low, as I would anticipate, at least initially, they will be able to. The daily RSI is not oversold. The hourly RSI is right down at oversold. So Hexo, OGI, and ACB stand out to me. VFF is also in a monthly uptrend after the strength that we've seen. Monthly inside bar is forming. We broke key support on VFF today and didn't like any bearish entry on that break because of how extended we are in the past week and a half of trading just to get to that support level. So we broke 1676 and did not get much follow through, and then we closed back above that level. In order for the bulls to change this momentum, and again, that hourly bounce was more significant on VFF than a lot of individual names today, but in order to see any kind of shift in momentum, I have to see the high of Friday break of 1834. And if we get the break, we're going to look for a lower high compared to the $22 level, but it would tell us that the weekly consolidation is no major red flag. Again, with where we came from, this kind of weekly pullback is no red flag. T-God on the daily. All bears, bear break inside bar. Weekly time frame is also still in an uptrend, but it's not nearly as strong as the names that I just highlighted. 306 is support on the weekly chart. But with the size of the pullback, we can anticipate that when we do bounce on the weekly, we're just going to set a lower high, as opposed to some of these other names. Let's see, OGI on the weekly chart we could bounce, and I would assume a lower high at this point just because of the sector as a whole. But you can see this weekly consolidation is not nearly as significant. We pulled back about 15%, whereas at this point, T-God has pulled back much more significantly than that. And my measuring tool not wanting to work, so we pulled back about more than that. 20%. 20% roughly, we'll say. Let's see, 116, 232. I don't know. Figure it out. C-Web. So here's now where we're looking at the weekly uptrends on USMJ and the amount of space the bulls have to work with. So the weekly uptrend is intact on C-Web if we can hold 1751. And we are still way above that level. Increasing bull volume on the way up. We're going to see if we keep decreasing bear volume on the way down. Again, the amount of pullback from the all-time high, we are going to anticipate that a weekly bounce will just give us a weekly lower high. But we are anticipating the weekly uptrend is going to remain intact, at least initially, on that bounce. So the daily chart on C-Web, let's make sure I got the right C-Web this time around. Weekend video, I did the Chinese ETF bull. But for C-Web on the daily chart, clear pullback. We've now seen 7 of the last 8 days in a row red. There's no major red flags on this volume. We continually see declining bear volume after the increasing bull volume on the way up. We're looking down at 24.34 support. And the low of today, 24.28, just barely broke it. Next level is 23 even. And I'm watching the exponential support as a visual guide to be looking for the potential of that weekly higher low to form. Again, on any bounces, we have to see the hourly trend change as step number 1. If the hourly trend does not change, it's just a weak bounce cooling off RSI levels. Change the hourly trend to the bulls. We have to zoom out to the daily and anticipate that daily lower highs are going to be coming on a lot of these bounces. The bulls will clearly shift momentum when we change daily trends, and that's not going to happen anytime soon. The bulls are going to have to build on progress over multiple days and probably even a week or two to be able to see daily trend changes take place. One more thing to mention is CNBC is about to have MJ week. So that's probably due to 420. But there's going to be a lot of coverage on CNBC about the sector. And that's going to give some exposure. And that's going to, I'd much rather have it be that rather than, the hype euphoria market and have them trap a whole bunch of people. At least there's some nice entry opportunities where they're going to be highlighting these companies as opposed to pretty much signaling the top as they have many times in the past in many sectors. So C-Web, hourly bounce at the end of the day, very weak. Looks like a bear flag. Have to change the hourly trend to step number 1. Otherwise, we're just looking for cooling off RSI levels before further downside. CURA, support is approaching at 1107. Weekly uptrend, anything above 815. So another name with a ton of space to work with to maintain that weekly uptrend. The daily chart, not near oversold. But if we see a break of 1107, there is a lack of support. And actually, we broke it by 10 pennies today. Not a lot of follow through, but we do need to be cautious because below that, we're looking at 1014 and then a gap at 923. And on the hourly time frame, a very weak bear flag bounce attempt at the end of the day thus far. And Cura, I will certainly be interested if we were to fill that gap, but that's a long way away. TRUL, bulls trying to put a stop to the bearish momentum ever since earnings. Have we changed the hourly trend? No, we have not. Changing the hourly trend is step number 1. We can't believe the bulls at all until we change the hourly trend. Weekly time frame, anything above 1497 is a higher low, keeping the uptrend intact. We are at the exponential support on the 12 period right now where the last consolidation low held. But we don't have any sign of a bounce. We have to change the hourly trend. Once we do, we zoom out to the daily and we're just looking for a daily lower high to form compared to 2118 where we are coming from. Hourly RSI was oversold. It cooled off on that weak bounce attempt. IAN still in free fall. Double bottom broke. So double bottom of 607 has broken. And IAN is one of those names where we are looking at daily oversold RSI, but the weekly uptrend has been lost. So we're looking at it on the monthly time frame like some of the Canadian major players because it's a clear equilibrium on the monthly chart. I currently am scaling in to a position which I will try and establish a game plan around for the potential of a monthly high or low being set. The odds that I'm going to nail that timing are not high. But if I'm scaling into a position in oversold conditions on the daily time frame, I currently have 2 positions. My average would be at about maybe 618, 619 on the Canadian side. I'm on the US, so don't have the exact number, but I've entered 2 positions, and if this daily chart keeps dropping, I will add another couple positions. If this gets a weak bounce attempt and a daily bear flag, I will not add more, and I will look to scale out some of my current position and exit a bit. So what I want to do ideally is see an oversold bounce on the daily time frame for IAN. I'm well aware that the sector is probably going to have to bounce with each other, everybody, to get IAN going. But I will be looking to scale out a portion of my position. I'm looking for a 10% bounce from the bottom whenever that bottom is set. So 591 were our bottom. I'd be looking for a bounce to 650. But what I would be looking to do is scale out some of my position in profit to lower my break-even point. So let's just use nice round numbers. Let's say my average was $6 on IAN in 2 positions, and the bounce gets going. I scale out half of my position at 630. Instantly, my break-even point is now 570. I can put a stop loss at break-even and then say, all right, let's see if I nailed it and hope that the monthly high or low is set. If it is, I'm going to be in a very comfortable long-term position for the next however many weeks or maybe a couple months. And if it is not, I have 0 risk and I stop out break-even. So that's why I look to enter on weakness, and knowing the longer-term pattern and knowing that the most likely scenario is a higher low on the monthly time frame for IAN, I'm going to look to try and scale in to daily oversold conditions, which are getting extreme as far as the amount of red days in a row, 9 red days in a row, lower highs every single day for 8 days in a row. And that's my strategy. So on the hourly here at the end of the day, we did get a bit of a bounce, but it's just a weak bounce attempt cooling off RSI levels. We must change the hourly trend to get any kind of follow through. OH, daily chart continuing to pull back. We zoom out to the weekly. It is a weekly uptrend, and the bulls have forever to work with. So much space here to maintain that weekly uptrend. Look at the exponential support. We held it the last consolidation. We're approaching it this time around. All bull volume on the way up. No real scary bear volume on this pullback. And on the daily time frame, we can see that. Bear volume, no big deal at this point. Not oversold on the daily. The hourly RSI, weak bounce attempt, cooling off from oversold conditions. So here's another example of that same strategy that I'm looking at on IAN. If I'm playing an oversold bounce on the hourly time frame for an individual name, whoever it is, and I make an entry or I scale into 2 entries, I look to take profit short term on that bounce to lower my cost basis and then try and let that bounce have more follow through to play out. So again, just another quick example of OH. Let's say I start scaling in and my average is $11. Perhaps I look to take partial profit at $11.20, and then my break-even point is $10.80. Set a stop at break-even or just below break-even, where if we drop to lower lows, I stop out of the position. And again, that gives me the chance, that gives me a controlled risk chance to get into a trade before the momentum shifts more significantly. And again, that takes a lot of practice. So that's the kind of thing that you would want to paper trade, scaling in and scaling out to manage positions. CL, further downside as well. Next support on CL, 1409 is the key level to be watching. We bounced off 1416 today. Weekly uptrend, very easily intact. Not going to be in jeopardy anytime soon. We're just looking for a weekly higher low to form. And the hourly RSI got right down towards oversold. Weak bounce attempt, cooled it off. Have to change the hourly trend as step number 1. If we change the hourly trend, we zoom out to the daily and we look for just a daily lower high to form. TILT is a name getting to oversold conditions on the daily as well in free fall for 8 days in a row. Also seeing 7 days in a row of lower highs every day. Weekly time frame is a different setup here. We have a lack of support, meaning RSI levels can get more overextended, and we're just looking down towards the IPO levels. So giving back a ton of this move, the clear bear break was 262, Since then, we pulled back 20% roughly. And on the hourly time frame, none of these bounces have done anything to be convincing for the bulls. So if you're looking to get into an oversold bounce play like TILT, it's a little bit more tricky, a little bit higher risk. But if we look at the long-term pattern, I would anticipate a monthly higher low to form in this setup, but I'm not nearly as confident as I would be on IAN, because IAN has a lot more price history and there's volume red flags here. Look at the bull volume on 1 month on the way up, and look at the amount of bear volume on the pullback to this point. Definitely there's some bull volume mixed in there, but that's a lot of bear volume in there as well. Look at the last week, all bear last week, and that volume was 5.3 million, and that month's entire bull volume was 7.9 million. So volume has me a bit concerned. Just be cautious on TILT and don't treat it as if you would other name that has different setup, different price history, different confidence essentially in the bulls. But when the sector bounces, names like TRUL, or I should say, take that back, names like Tilt, names like TLRY, the names that get more crushed to the downside, generally see bigger percentage bounces on the way back up. So higher risk, higher reward traders are watching those names. So just to summarize real quick, tons of US MJ names still in weekly uptrends. There's a few Canadian MJ names in weekly uptrends. We have names like Labs in blue sky breakout mode. I don't know if I even did Labs. So Labs following through, big bull volume, hourly uptrend still intact. Anything above, really anything above 520 area will keep the bulls in full control. A little bit of profit taking at the end of the day on that new all-time high. Anything on the daily above 424 is a higher low. So again, just a lot of strength and a lack of liquidity. Here's oils, penny stock. Again, lack of volume. We're seeing volume here of about $2 to $3 million. I can't even trade the oils US ticker because it gets about $4,000 of volume a day. So these are low cap names that take a lot less dollar volume to run them. So, I mean, if what the chart guys did was run plays and then dump on people and lock in our money, which we certainly don't do, the chart guys could run a ticker like this pretty easily over a couple days. And so just be aware that, you know, this big bull move, it looks huge on the chart, but it doesn't take a whole lot of dollar volume on the way up. The faster you move on the way up, the faster you're going to pull back as well. So you just want to be cautious and walking up a stop loss. But it's very clear that some focus in this weakness, as profits are clearly leaving the MJ space on both sides of the border, we're having people put in their profits into this extraction space to try and get some more bull gains out of it, which they've done fairly successfully over the last couple of days. So back to my summary. Canadian MJ name have 3 names in weekly uptrends to be watching. OGI, ACB, and VFF is still strong. It's not exactly a weekly uptrend. Hexo is the other name that is in a weekly uptrend. T-God's in a weekly uptrend, though it's not very strong as well. US MJ names, much stronger weekly uptrends overall. And the major Canadian names, monthly tightening ranges for the vast majority of them. Let's see if CNBC coverage of the cannabis sector can get any kind of buying going on. It's certainly not going to be a catalyst of the S&P 500 strength that leads to bounces across this sector. So I don't know if we need a catalyst or if we're just going to see sellers exhaust themselves and a switch to a daily bounce underway. But at this point, we got to be cautious if the S&P 500 starts to see any kind of real consolidation. Tech sector earnings are about to roll through. We'll see how the market responds to the tech sector earnings overall. And shifting perspective to longer term timeframes on the sector as a whole, monthly and weekly setups. First off, know what's going on, big picture, and then zoom in and look for the details from there. Hope you're good. Have a great day. Do some good things out there. And we'll see you tomorrow. So taking a break from story time today, and these are my babies growing some tomatoes and cucumbers getting ready to go in the ground. And I don't have a greenhouse, so I take them out every day for a walk, leave them outside, and bring them back in at night so they can stay warm, because these cucurbits, as far as the cucumbers go, and the nightshade tomatoes, they want it 70 to 90 degrees all the time, so they wouldn't do too well outside. Growing more than I need and culling out the weaker ones, keeping the stronger ones. Probably got 5 different varieties of tomatoes. Green zebra, some Brandywine variety, you can tell the difference. These are your standard tomatoes. And then these leaves that are more rounded are the Brandywine variety. Different kinds of cucumbers, some for pickling and some for salads. They're gonna go crazy. I'm gonna trellis those up the side of my house. Currently in transition while I'm looking for a mini farm and going to move back into a spot that I was a couple months ago. So I had the other day I was sleeping over my girlfriend's house and I woke up at 6 as I heard the rain start pouring down, and I remembered I left these guys outside because it was going to be mild that night, and I had to run home before the sun came up, bring them back inside so they wouldn't get damaged. But it's good to expose them. The one disadvantage to a greenhouse is unless you roll up the sides, there is a lack of wind and a lack of elements, and that strengthens the stems. If you have wind that's knocking them back and forth, that builds their stems up, and if they're not exposed to that, it leaves them a bit weak. So it's been pretty windy today, so that'll strengthen them up real nice. And all the ones that I don't use, I'm probably going to do the tomatoes in some big pots, and I'll do the cucumbers in pots on my deck, which gets the best sun to climb up the side of the house. But the ones I don't use, I'm just going to stick into the ground and see if they can tough it out on their own. So those are my starts. Gonna do a whole bunch, planted potatoes in some pots, which I've never done potatoes in pots. Did that a couple days ago, and gonna get some summer squash and winter squash going. I love dill. I want dill and cilantro, so I'll keep you all posted. We actually have some aphids going crazy on some of our peas, so I ordered a whole bunch of ladybugs and praying mantises. Gonna get the insect predator game going, so I'll introduce you to my baby ladybug and praying mantises once I get those. But you should all plant some stuff. It's not really that hard, and it's a fun experiment, and you can learn from it, and then you can eat stuff that you grow. And the connection that you get from eating something that you grow from seed is unlike anything that I've ever experienced, and it completely changed what eating food is for me.